Let's roll.
Oh, this is Free Minds. I don't even know what this episode is, but this is probably going to be a bonus episode, season 2. I'm here. I'm Trey Jackson. I'm the host. There's no John Nichols today, normally my co-host. But I got another, well, I don't know. What am I going to call you?
You guys can call me Al.
Al. I got Al here. So Al is in the Atlanta area, and we were talking. We just thought that a podcast would be good where we just kind of dive in to stuff that we haven't really super dove into on this podcast before. Like, what is reality and like what is it really from like a spiritual scientific standpoint, and like alchemy, and like there's a bunch of different places we might touch on. But we want to go with the alias Al.
We will.
Just because that's what we're doing, but we're still going to talk about who he is, and I think he has a really interesting story to tell, and let's just see what happens. This is never orchestrated in a way that makes sense. So
does anything really?
No, nothing makes sense.
Well,
nothing in this world makes sense unless you feel into it instead of think about it.
That's right.
So yeah, on the podcast, what we normally do, and that was really loud. On the podcast, what we normally do is kind of dive into, okay, you're a person, you're on this journey, you're where you are right now, but like, how did you get there? Because nothing's ever in a linear fashion that makes sense. We're always going in 18 different directions, and we wind up where we wind up because the universe, through some magic, has led us here through hardship, and it's never easy, but we find a way. So usually what people will do is they'll just kind of share their story into who they are. And I think the identity of a person is very interesting because it's usually orchestrated by our parents or by society. And then we're downloading all these beliefs, and then we have to unwind all that stuff to kind of find out who we really are, which takes time and effort and patience.
Yeah.
But you could start in your childhood. You could start wherever you want to start.
Let's do it. Yeah. So I think it's most fitting that I do.
Well, actually, let's just say brief high level what you do now, just so people know what
high
you're doing.
level.
Yeah.
I am a brain scientist by education, always in training.
Yeah.
I am very interested in the energetics of medicine, the various ways that the kinds of energy that we talk about on this podcast can be interpreted through the realm of medicine, healing, supporting mental wellness, supporting like preventative health in people over the course of their lifetimes.
So like holistically, as opposed to just looking at the scientific portion.
Yes,
we're incorporating everything.
That's like one of our buzzwords that is really taking root these days, but I'm really interested in fleshing out that definition in the course of my medical career, making it a holistic that is like accessible by everybody, not just, maybe more uppity or well-informed seeming crowds.
Yeah.
And really teaching people about the body's innate ability to heal itself. There's a lot of, science that has existed for a very long time that is, I believe, sort of making a resurgence about how we are capable of doing that, and how, we have sort of caught ourselves using, believing that drugs and other sorts of, quote, quote, modern interventions are actually like the catalyst for our wellness, but they kind of just get us around that, closer to that space of being actually, in a better state of health. But our bodies are the ones who actually have this innate wisdom to take them in, work with them, bring yourself back to good health.
So in a way, you're kind of empowering people to remember that they have all the tools they need to heal.
Exactly. In a way, I am trying to teach people about themselves.
Their bodies.
One really big irony of being at the top of the food chain is that we don't actually know anything about how our bodies work, or about listening to what our bodies are telling us when there is some sort of distress. Animals are really, really good at keeping themselves healthy. Mm-hmm. Animals don't really have mental health problems because they are really attuned to what it is they're going through, how to reduce, stress levels.
Yeah.
one thing that can really mess with us over time, and they address it very quickly. They don't really need to get an education on it, but
Oh, they innately know, right?
they do, and children know actually.
Yeah.
And old people and maybe more enlightened people.
And we'll get to your stuff. I mean, I don't know how long this is gonna be, but like Bruce Lipton, like the biology of belief, like he just talks about like when you're a kid, you're told you have to go to the doctor to get well, and then you start downloading that belief, like, oh, I can't heal myself, and that's like a program, whatever you want to call it. I think we're kind of emotional computers in a way, but you download a belief like, oh, I need to go to the doctor to heal, and like there have been studies done, like when you're on your way to the doctor, you start feeling better. Because you're like, oh, I have to go to this spot to heal. And it's like, I can only enter that frequency of healing if I'm in that space of the doctor.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And when we'll get to all that stuff.
We will. I have a really set of funny stories that's kind of coming through right now about what you just said.
Yeah. But let's just first like kind of give a brief who you are. And brief could be like 20 minutes. But, whatever it winds up being, I don't like to control the way these conversations go.
So who am I? So like I mentioned, I am a brain scientist. I'm a neuroscientist. I like to use what I have learned academically to look at, trying to redefine and re-inspire what are like scientists and left brain people.
I guess the better way of asking is like, how did you get to here? How did you get to the point where you are the brain scientist?
Sure.
Where did all this start?
So why did I want to do this? That is a good way to put it. Maybe that is like what got me interested in science in the first place.
Yeah, like as a kid or whenever.
Definitely. So it actually does track back to when I was a child. And what happened to me as a child actually falls to the root of what our science can't explain. So when I was about 6 or 7 years old, my kidneys started to fail.
Okay.
And I would spill a lot of protein, like they're like the body's filtration system for your blood. So a lot of the essential nutrients that we need in our bodies, my body would eliminate. So I was basically a dying cell, age 7 onward.
Wow.
There's no name for what I have in terms of a disease name. They call it a syndrome. A syndrome is just a collection of symptoms. So I had nephrotic. So, your kidneys have nephrons. The cells of the kidney are called nephrons. So I had nephrotic syndrome.
Okay.
It was just a set of symptoms. Really dramatic events of protein spilling, etc., would be precipitated by anything, being outside for too long.
And when you say protein spilling, is there another way of saying that for, I guess, non-medical?
Let's call it my kidneys are not filtering my blood.
Okay.
Let's say I don't really know how to explain it.
You can't get your nutrients because there's no filter going on.
All
so
of the nutrients for my food is being dumped.
Okay, that's the perfect way.
It's being like eliminated, so it's like useless for me to eat food. It does nothing for me.
Wow. So you're like, well, maybe I'll get my energy from the sun or something.
Yeah,
but I don't know.
Yeah, this disease was basically asking me to become a plant.
Interesting. Okay. So
yeah,
I'm gonna shut that.
Yeah, go for it.
But so yeah, I guess that's happening as a 7-year-old. How are you processing this, and I guess how is the universe leading you out of this, or how are you leading yourself out of that?
Yeah, definitely. So what's funny is that when you are sort of given this kind of diagnosis and maybe outlook as a 7-year-old, your physicians and your family, no one really keeps you like, on the up and up of what's actually going on with you. And, a lot of people at that point were kind of hesitant to believe that this would be a life condition. But unfortunately, for most people who have what I had, it is a life condition. And they usually have lowered life expectancies as the individual grows up, and kidney function sort of gets worse over time, eventually probably needing like transplants. And, you can only, a transplant lasts maybe 10 years.
Yeah.
And then you die young. They pinned it on, another one of our buzzwords, autoimmune disorder, right? Like
Hear
the
that a lot.
body was just
If
spontaneously.
you ever watched House, you probably heard it a million times.
Yes,
But-
for like everything that they have diagnosed. That was like my favorite show growing up too. So, being outside for too long, having slight colds, not getting enough sleep, having the slightest pollen reactions, like seasonal hay fever outside, like absolutely everything. Foods that were overly condimented or salty, they would all trigger my kidneys to stop working. So they put me, my doctors and my health team, they couldn't really do anything but guess about why or how this was possible.
Yeah.
And I was just put on really heavy dosages of steroids for like most of my life, for months at a time. Really, really strong doses. The side effects were brutal.
Yeah.
Prednisone.
Yeah.
And circling back to like one small point you had said about every time we knew that my kidneys were starting to have like an episode of like mini failure, let's call it.
Yeah.
I would go to the doctor, my nephrologists and my pediatricians and all these specialists. And I wouldn't really understand, because I was a child, like the ins and outs of what was happening to me or what this really meant. But I vaguely remember I would go to the doctor, and the thing is, I never really like felt like really bad. Maybe I had bouts of being really tired, low protein in your body as a little kid. But it's almost like every time I left the doctor's office, and they again could do nothing more than just say like, oh, it's happening again. All right, here's a prescription. I would feel myself walking with this particular leap in my step out of Kaiser's offices. I don't know how else to describe it, but it was this really bizarre, innate feeling of I'm about to start getting better.
And it's almost placebo at that point.
And then, then I would start my meds, and they did help me, They helped. I was lucky that they helped me. In a lot of cases, the meds don't work. It's a really mysterious disease. Or syndrome, sorry.
Yeah. Cat's saying hi to us. So
hi. Kitty.
If we get distracted.
So
he wants to heal you.
He does. So yeah, that was sort of my life going on and off of steroids.
Do you think?
Right about until I started high school. So what was kind of weird is that as I grew up and I had more, let's call them like triggering events, like having a cold or having a bout of allergies.
Yeah.
My kidneys would have like this, I would start losing a lot of protein from my body, and the meds eventually would sort of, like maybe patch up my kidneys. So they started working again until the next event would cause me to relapse, right? I feel
like that's got to cause a lot of anxiety too. Just like, when's it going to happen again?
Yes.
Mentally?
I remember when I was 10 years old, they finally told me that I may have the condition forever.
Which I mean, part of me would be like, well, fuck this. Like, this sucks.
Right.
Like, I feel like it's very easy to get very negative in that space.
Definitely.
And
the medications also mess with my moods. I was very moody.
Yeah.
Meds, a lot of steroids do that. Hunger issues. I had a lot of, issues understanding myself.
Right.
I was just so, drugged up. But again, it was the only thing that could conceivably help me. And I had really, really kind people supporting me through all of it, my doctors included. So I was lucky. As I grew older and I had, these trigger events that should have triggered something like really catastrophic, they started affecting me. So my relapses were less intense every passing time. And obviously nobody wanted to like count the chickens, or what is it, count the eggs in the basket before they hatch, because you never want to be too sure about that. It's like people who are quote like cured from cancer. You're never really the remissions, I guess, a little okay.
Yep.
Kitty's back.
Cat always just wants the attention.
So Yeah, I got a killer flu, something like that, when I was about 14 or 15 years old, and no issues happened.
Huh. And that's the first time that nothing
And
happened.
I was in shock. Um, I think my family was in like really quiet disbelief. No one could explain it.
Was
Uh,
anything different that time, or was it just
no, it was just I just I woke up with a crazy fever, and anytime anything like that happened for the 10 years before that, um, I just I had that sinking feeling. I was like, great,
yeah?
like here we go. I better get ready to get started on
And
my
is that the
steroids.
feeling that came up?
Oh, completely.
Okay.
I was like, maybe it won't be as bad this time. I started to like, I don't know. I was like a teenager. I was starting to get cocky, being like, yeah, my kidneys can handle this.
Well,
Um, I was like, maybe I was optimistic. I was hopeful. I had to have faith. I was
right.
just committed to not letting this end me early on. Psychologically, I was just unwilling to get worse.
You sound motivated. You sounded motivated.
Yes,
to
definitely.
say this isn't not this time. I'm gonna actually overcome this time.
It was funny because I don't know, maybe growing up in another sort of culture or a medicalized system, you think it's impossible. Like your moods, especially back then, a lot of the literature behind how your beliefs and your emotions affect your body's immune functioning um, doesn't really do much. People are like, if you're taking your meds, then you should be getting better. But
Right.
I was just like, the meds can't explain why I am getting better over time. Nothing could.
So at this point, I don't. Maybe you'll segue into this. Are you like at all spiritual, or are you at all curious about any of that yet?
No,
Okay.
absolutely nothing. This was just me trying to get through what, the cards I was dealt.
Okay.
Um, So I start high school, and a couple of more, of those trigger events happen, and I'm fine. And it wasn't long before my specialists and my family and I were kind of just told, like, it appears that you are fine.
You're just like, it appears.
And I was like,
Really?
what
That's a
does that
diagnosis?
mean? Is there like a test? And they're like, well, no, because we don't understand what caused it or why steroids work. It's just a thing that has been shown to work. And in my case, it did. In a lot of cases, it doesn't.
Interesting. Yeah.
So I was like, what do you mean I'm fine? That was just always my question. They're like, we don't know, but you appear to not be getting sick anymore.
What
I
a
was like,
scientific
yes,
way of saying that.
very adroitly spoken.
Yeah.
So I was a couple of years shy of being like 18, and I was given a new lease on life. Before that, I hadn't really been able to spend time outside. I kind of struggled
Because
to
of
make
pollen or-
friends. I grew up in hospitals.
Fuck.
My life was just I wasn't supposed to have a life, so to speak, right?
Right.
And I'm almost 18, and they're like, surprise, like, just kidding.
You get to go live now, dude.
You get to go be like a normal, regular teenager. But there's like a whole other segue, like, story about like delayed psychological development. My perspective on death and how people should live their day-to-day lives like was very different early on.
And I've heard stories like this to where like people that grow up in this isolation where they're not with the way society's thinking, they're not engaging with all those belief systems or whatever, kind of frees them up to form their own belief systems and make that a lot stronger because they haven't been constantly influenced by everyone else. If you're, does that make sense?
Completely. The things that a regular teenager holds important were really not where my
Right.
interests were. I was like, these, regular teens are, aware of fashion trends or who's popular and who's not, or
Stuff that really doesn't matter.
stuff that in the grand scheme of
scheme.
life, yeah, they're not that big of a deal. And I was just appreciating that I was alive, that my kidneys worked. I didn't have to eat this horribly bland diet of food. Most of my growing up, I didn't really even eat foods that had flavor. Like even
Wow.
like eating was like, I'm like I'm almost 16 and I'm like getting to binge eat, like drink
Yeah. Yeah.
binge like eat pizza. I the concept of like my friends like, you know, sneaking like a beer or something like that, that would have been heresy for my kidneys. Like
Yeah.
hell no, you know. So I was like a 10-year-old in like an almost 18-year-old's body.
But at the same time, you have a much different outlook on death and like
That's
what
it.
life
You know,
is and-
I, in my perspective, everything I had received was like extra time, in a sense, almost like empowering me to quote quote let my freak flag fly.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not going to live a life where I'm afraid of things, or I'm gonna make the most out of things because this was all bonus time for me.
That's a great perspective that a lot of people don't have. I mean, it's even hard for me sometimes to have that perspective.
Yeah.
Until like, it's hard to have that lens of the way you view the world because it's your lens that matters.
Yeah. If you don't have a good lens, then you're looking at everything wrong.
Well, not wrong. It's just it's
You're
a
looking
it's
at
a choice,
everything
right?
the way you should be at that specific moment.
Yeah.
But it might not lead you to like your most, I don't know, let's call it your most empowered, fulfilled version.
The best version of yourself. that you can be, right?
Exactly.
So
So this experience was terrifying for me, and it gave me a lens to analyze how, you know, people carry themselves, how people perceive illness. What is illness? What is the meaning of death? What is the meaning of, you know, you get to live your life however you want, but like, here's the impending doom.
so you're very curious about everything. You're like,
Made me very, very curious about kind of like the thoughts that we set up for ourselves to keep our minds like happy.
or keep our minds busy and
Maybe
so that
keep
we
our
don't
minds
notice things.
distracted from
Yeah.
the reality of, you know,
What's happening?
what else is going on. Yeah.
So okay, so at this point, we have a new lease on life.
Yes.
Where are we going to go from here? Where do we start going?
So, because I really couldn't spend a lot of time outside or really do sports most of my growing up, I turned to books. I became a huge nerd. I used to just focus on besting like my tally of books read every year, like second grade on. I was a, you know, quote, quote, voracious reader,
Yeah.
as they say. I just became fascinated with learning things, understanding things. I was like, maybe I could come across something that may help me resolve my case. I became very good at school. I really enjoyed learning. A lot of times it felt like it wasn't my first time learning something. The school just always came to me.
Yeah. Like you're just remembering stuff you already knew.
Yeah, in a way. In particular, languages. They came to me very easily.
Cool.
I was blessed to be, you know, like an academic kind of brain. Yeah. I was happy I didn't let it get the best of me.
Your ego didn't take it and run with it.
And I definitely knew some kids who
Yeah.
they let it because they had nothing else to compare to.
Right.
And I was like, that's their big positive in life, and mine was like, I get to live.
Yeah.
So
I get to live.
That's where I'm gonna put my eggs.
It is interesting, and we haven't really talked about like how, at least on this podcast, we don't talk about how like in my view, like as a spirit, you kind of plan your life out in the way that's going to work best in terms of creating the best you.
Right.
And like it seems like you set up a foundation to where, because of all your gifts that you have that are pretty innate, you set it up where you're like, oh, if I value life so immensely, then I'm not going to let the ego part take it. I'm not going to take that and run with it like a lot of people normally would. So like you shifted the first part of your life to where the second portion is going to be set up much better.
There's
for
like
you.
those lessons that humble you as an adult,
Right.
were the very first ones I got.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is kind of empowering. In a
It
way.
can be. It can
Yeah.
be. There is a price
It's a
to
choice.
pay.
It's a choice.
But
I know it probably was not fun to live through that, like at all.
I didn't think I would.
Yeah.
But I'm grateful that I did. It really cultivated me. It kind of cultivated the soil by which I would like
Yeah.
you know, learn any other experience that followed thereafter. Nothing else has ever really amounted to that sort of, you know, gravity
Right.
of like what's going on in your life, right? So went all through high school.
Okay.
like a normal nerdy kid.
Yeah.
And then when I was maybe about halfway through, almost done with school, I was about 17 years old. My older sister, we're very, very close. We're very similar also psychologically.
Yeah.
Naturally.
Are y'all twins?
No,
Oh, okay.
she's like a decade older.
Okay.
But a lot of people would think that we kind of are twins in a lot of ways. We kind of react to things really similarly.
Yeah.
Our personalities, weird overlaps. Like we've even had points in interactions where like our significant others are like quote like misunderstanding or jealous of the sibling because no one can make the other laugh like the sibling. It's a really deep-seated like emotional connection that my sister and I have always shared, and she was the one who, let's say, began to have her awakening.
Yeah. So you're around that.
Years ahead of me. And, life became very difficult for her. Like the lessons that, like I had as a kid, her version of them started happening when she was a young adult in her, mid-20s or so. Most people start encountering reality, we call it, at that point. And she needed answers. For people like my sister and myself and just some of the people that we are descendant from in South America.
From Bolivia.
From Bolivia, yes. The sacral chakra of the world.
Yeah.
She was very special, and she started to perceive the world through senses that are non-traditional. And even in dream states or intuitive hits, she was correct, like accurate about things that she just would not have otherwise known. And it led to asking questions.
So she's a little psychic, basically.
Yes. We may call it that.
Whatever the word is.
Whatever your word is for it.
There's another sense.
There was another sense, and she was beginning to get naturally tapped into it. And it was like almost intimidating because most people don't really have, like regular exposure to that.
Was she like embracing that and touting it around, or being like, oh, I think it's I just knew that. Interesting. Like just very curious about it instead of taking it and owning it.
I think there was one part curiosity, one part fear and misunderstanding developed from, either cultural or religious upbringing.
Yeah.
No, it happens to the best of us. But, those things are in place so that we have something to jump off from. So she took both of those things in mind, and she sought out help from the Center for Love and Light,
which is in Atlanta, Georgia, if you're curious, around Druid Hills area.
She did find help, and she found a teacher.
That's what happens when you pet the cat, man.
I know, it just like happens.
He's the biggest shedding animal on the planet.
He is.
Hey, Milo, come here. So she found the Center for Love and Light.
She did. And she found a teacher.
Yes. You can say who it is. I don't know.
Her name is Jamie Butler.
Yeah, we've talked about her on this podcast before.
She's a close mentor. Good soul.
Super good soul.
So
So
my sister begins getting an education on what's going on with her. I remember my first introduction to meditation and the concept of finding fulfillment through experience of self was through learning about the Kabbalah, ancient Jewish mysticism.
Yeah, I don't know if that's related to the Kabbalion, or there might be two. I think because one's Hermetic philosophy, Kabbalion.
Sure. Yeah.
But I don't know as much about the Kabbalah.
It's just like a more mystical sect of Judaism. It's one of the oldest precepts about it. Yes, it is more non-traditional of it, but it's more about. It's not so much about God, a God. It's
Right.
more about experience of self, understanding what really are we,
Right.
breaking things apart.
Consciousness.
What godliness is found in us.
Right. So
Right.
our connection to source consciousness.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well put.
Cool.
So I was 17 and I started meditating. I started, my ritual practices, ritual in terms of like mental self-care,
Yeah.
maintenance of the body, maintenance of the mind, trying to really understand what are we in this place we call Earth.
Yeah. And even like rituals, like people confuse that sometimes. Like brushing your teeth is a ritual.
Yeah. Waking
Because
up and
you have an
like
intention.
stretching is a bit of a ritual.
Yeah. As long as you have some kind of intention behind what you're doing.
Yeah.
I brush my teeth so that they don't get cavities. Okay, that's my ritual.
Right.
And I do it by the act of brushing.
Exactly.
Versus the act of meditation.
It's more like a routine.
Right.
I don't like,
It's just a word, and people, I don't know, people get sometimes weird about ritual, but it's just,
Sure.
it's just, you're placing an intention in a space of activity in some capacity.
Exactly. I was just learning about, what things do I do throughout my day that are a representation of what I believe or how I act or how I respond to people and things I know and don't know. It's just practicing becoming self-aware.
Right.
That was, when I say my ritual, it's just like me learning how to be self-aware about how I carry myself and how I engage with the world around me. I think that's a pretty healthy thing for a teenager to do.
Yeah, and most teenagers are not self-aware. Most are unconscious. No, if I was.
Yeah,
I don't know what my thoughts are doing. I don't know the way I'm reacting to similar situations. I
Yeah.
don't know what my triggers are. But if
Exactly.
you're mindful, you get to see all of that.
Yes, you do. You get to understand why are you the way that you are, and approach it, lovingly,
Right.
wholeheartedly accepting it,
Not super like judgmental and like, oh my gosh, like
like most teenagers have to.
yeah. So that, I mean, you got a jump start there too.
Definitely. So, thanks to her, I knew about this figure in the distance, this like magical being, Jamie Butler, who I was hesitant about doing anything personally with.
Right.
Fast forward a couple of years, and I find myself up in Massachusetts. I am in school. I'm in college. And I, at the time, felt something very unfortunate. And little did I know that it was my awakening.
Here it comes.
Here it comes. When I finished high school, I began to experience.
And when we say awakening, just, I guess the best way to put that would be like
the awareness I was talking about.
Yeah, you're becoming more aware of yourself and your connection to everything.
It's kind of like so when I mentioned that I was, as a teenager, like learning how to become self-aware, I kind of reached a point where, let's just say there was like a bridge to cross.
Yeah.
And an awakening, that like spiritual people call an awakening is like a really short set of time in which you rapidly accelerate through really big epiphanies and realizations and just like crazy, aha.
You start kind of committing to them too.
Like a bunch of aha moments happen really close together in time, and they can be kind of intense.
They can be.
Depending
on your mental state at the time and your emotional state.
Depending on also how much you're willing to listen and take in at a time.
Yeah, because you can ignore it.
You can. Some people try that in my experience, and then it just comes back harder.
Yeah, or it'll take your hand away,
Yes.
Shit happens, for sure.
All sorts of stuff happens.
So your awakening starts happening. What does that kind of encompass?
So for me, let's see, how does this really, so many things happen at the very start of it. Medical symptoms.
Okay.
Bringing me back full circle to inexplicable medical phenomena. I began to suffer from very bizarre sets of symptoms that doctors couldn't really explain, to the point while I was in school where I was actually put in quarantine for Ebola.
Wow.
I didn't have Ebola.
During the Ebola outbreak?
Yes.
Wow.
I was being taught I sat in the front row of a famous professor who was traveling back and forth between Massachusetts and Africa to contain the crisis. And they actually thought he may have brought back some sort
Did they
of
quarantine him
virus or something. No, he was back in Africa.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So I'm locked in a room with nurses calling me through a phone to ask me if I had left the country or been in
It's not
contact
funny, but like,
with
geez,
people.
It's so ridiculous.
Yes, because that was the best that they had. One of the world's best hospitals and academic institutions to ask me what was going on with me. I had a fever that would only appear every 7 days.
The one. So quarantine and Ebola.
So quarantine and Ebola.
How does a person deal with that as a person when
So-
you're like, oh, I'm a person and they think I have Ebola? What?
So the news was pretty scary, and I was like, I wonder why they put me in a room, and then I tried to exit the room, and the door was locked. I started laughing to myself, like, is this really the comedy that is my life?
Did they tell you it was quarantine, or did you have to like? You're like, oh, I'm actually locked in.
No,
here.
I had to like reason through it, and then I kept like knocking, asking for someone to let me out or talk to me, and then the phone started ringing in the room next to the chair. And it was a team of nurses who like triaged me, asking me if I'd been to Africa in the last 6 months or was in contact with anyone who had been. And I had been.
Yeah.
For a professor who contributed greatly to fixing the Ebola crisis. So
Yeah.
I was front row.
Wow.
So they thought I had somehow developed the disease. Because I presented with really mysterious symptoms like cyclical fevers, but my fever would only appear once every 7 days, just about.
Interesting.
And it would be really high, and they'd all freak, and I would be fine by the evening, and then I'd be back a week later, and by the 4th week of this, they were concerned, and they they locked me up.
It's so weird though. Once every 7 days.
Yeah, you mentioned that. It was,
and-
it's synchronicities, let's call it. Just
Yeah.
random. Anyways, no one could chalk it up to any issue other than maybe, yet again, some autoimmune thing. I had to take antibiotics like a week before all of that started, and I was given like a cocktail of 3.
Okay.
Because I had other weird symptoms going on, and also at the same time as that, one of my wisdom teeth had developed an infection, and I had needed like an emergency.
God.
Yeah. So all these weird things started happening with my body, and no doctor could explain what was going on with me. And nearing the end of those 4 weeks, I lost like all ability to digest like food. So I lost about 40 pounds. I looked
good fitness
great.
program. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, it didn't look like I was going to get better. So
Yeah, I feel like it could get pretty bleak.
this was like the human medical perspective on what was happening.
Okay.
At night, I would try to go to bed, and I would just get these flood of images in my head. Beautiful locations, mountains, countrysides, grasslands, Egypt, a bunch of faces just whirling all around me like a montage. And it plagued me every night. I couldn't really sleep because I just saw all of this crazy activity in my brain.
Were you still in your body though? You weren't. Like,
Yes, I was.
traveling
I was very
to-
much.
Okay.
I was just no meditation. Just a guy trying to go to sleep, and I don't know. I got connected to some things.
Something. Okay. So it's interesting how, like you said, that was the medical aspect, and then there's other aspects happening that I don't even. Do you tell doctors that? Like, what do you?
Well, at that point, I'm like, you know, in the middle of doing midterms and getting ready for finals, and I don't think I was ready to consider insanity because my cognitive faculties were always very intact, very strong, performed well academically. I studied a lot of psychopathology, so like mental disease in school, and I'm a cognitive neuroscientist, at the college level.
Right.
And I did run myself through like the tests and analyses, and I was like, no, I'm pretty sure I don't need to be admitted. I'm really busy right now, and I'm not doing anything crazy. And mental health is, very, it's governed by society's rules,
Right.
like definitions we have for it. But in other cultures, such as maybe the culture where I was born, it wasn't that weird.
No, they probably consider it more shamanic or something.
They probably would have considered it very special.
Yeah.
But obviously here things are different.
Okay. So how does this kind of progress? Like the once every 7 days, they eventually let you out of quarantine, or they just say...
It was just a few hours that they held me in there because they realized my symptoms didn't even align with Ebola. That was just the closest thing they
Gotcha.
had.
Okay.
So at the end of it, I left school for that semester because I was really weak. I was really scared. I didn't really know what was going on entirely. And that's how I ended up coming to Jamie Butler.
Okay. Yeah, that's what we were talking about.
For
Okay.
my very first reading.
Okay. How did that first reading go? And Jamie Butler works at the Center for Love and Light in Atlanta, Georgia. She's pretty awesome. If you're ever curious, just search jamiebutlermedium.com. But
very nice. Yeah.
Plug for no reason.
Oh, she no need.
Yeah.
She's great. Yeah. It was very unexpected. It was confusing. I was being trained in the sciences. I was very analytical, very left-brained.
Yeah.
But there were no answers for my condition that at time it seemed very scary. I just kept dropping weight. Like, you can't just keep going like that and have no doctor tell you what to do. I had seen surgeons, GI specialists, all sorts of people in counseling. Nothing seemed to work until I met Jamie. She made sense of everything, talking about, she introduced terms like awakening and like body becoming more sensitive kind of words. And that was very new to me.
Moving to like a higher vibrational state and
exactly.
You're
Like
discharging.
purging.
Yeah.
A lot of things energetically, physically that your body just does in order to be able to work with higher vibrational frequencies.
Yeah.
And this brought me back several years to when my sister was a few years older than I was at that time. And she started having many of the same things, completely inexplicable diseases, all sorts of these symptoms, bizarre dreams. And it's not permanent. It's just like a really short, punctuated period of intense, let's call it downloads. Your body is just rearranging things, how it functions, how you perceive things, how you react to things, the level, just like the bandwidth of emotions that you feel, they all got bigger, more sensitive. I definitely struggled with seeing sensitivity as a gift and as something to be treasured rather than something to be critical about.
Yeah, I have that fight all the time. It's like, why do I have to be empathic? Other people don't have to feel all this stuff. Why do I have to feel
Definitely.
it?
I think also that
there's two perspectives, but yeah.
I think very stereotypically speaking in this like quote woo-woo space.
Yeah.
Right now, the predominant energy or the kind of people who are attracted to it are women. They're very feminine. They're in tune with that sensitive side, right? We call the sensitive side. And so it felt a little bit counterbalancing to be a man experiencing this one. It was in like my family, I found out way later, it was all the women who had experiences like this. At the center, it is vastly women.
Yep.
So I was like, why me?
Same here, man.
So there's this
here.
entire other rabbit hole.
Yeah.
We will maybe
we
talk
might go
about
there.
it someday about men and women and how this alignment is redirecting balance, right?
And again, that is a big rabbit hole. But somebody once told me it's just we're able to ground it more.
Yeah, I could see that. Men are naturally. When I say detached, I don't mean it negatively. I just mean they can attribute things in let's just say the personality of the sensitivity is a little more grounded. It's
Yeah.
not as like far flung
It
out
doesn't
there emotionally.
sweep us away.
Exactly. We're very good at like toning it down.
And that doesn't. There's definitely ways that we could be numbing it.
Yes.
Sometimes too, and nothing's black and white. Everything's gray, so it's hard to like kind of describe it sometimes. But yeah, so you're a male, and you're like, this is weird for me to be this sensitive, and given everything else that's happened in your life so far too.
I realized I was coming upon this like a crossroads of destiny, so to speak.
Yeah.
I had, this option to keep understanding the world the way that my academic peers, scientific scholars, people in elite academia used to see the world and understand it the way everything we're taught in school. But I had finally reached this place where none of them could really connect to what I was going through with their, empirical, rational philosophy.
Left brain.
Huh?
Left brain. Yeah.
Yes. And I was like, I am very much a left brain person, and this is actually what is leading me to become more open-minded and pursue other philosophies of understanding how the world works.
Yeah.
It was out of necessity.
It's like you can look at the spiritual stuff with the left brain too.
You can.
Like consciousness and the database that is consciousness, or our neurons that are firing, the electricity that's running through our body,
The tools
the energy,
and the measurements of it all is coming
the
online
frequency,
now.
the vibration,
Yes.
quantum physics. Like it's all there to be studied in a scientific way if society were open to that. I mean, we need to merge the feeling and the thinking, obviously. You need both.
Exactly. And that is exactly what I am aiming to do in medicine, because of the experiences that have taken me, through both Eastern and Western philosophy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you ever Alan Watts any?
Yes.
He's pretty good at
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of videos online too.
So I got through school,
Yeah.
sort of really struggling to learn how to see the balance between those two styles of thinking. And it was like, even though I was like almost like 20 years old, neuroscientist, I felt like I was like a kindergartner in this world of energy or trying to learn. So I sought out education, instructors, teachers, lessons, courses, and ones that were validated. And in this space, there's not a lot of bureaucracy in place yet, which means anything goes. So you have to be careful with finding the right teacher, finding someone that, vibes with you.
Yep.
There's many lessons to be had in this space, and teachers just interpret, just like regular teachers interpret how to teach physics or how to teach biology. There's just they can spin.
Yeah,
It's
and
part of it.
We're all interpreting, and even when you get, you can get. We have to make sure we're not bringing our own baggage into it when we're teaching.
Very much
or
so.
whatever the baggage is, which is it's very important in this field, more than like if I was just teaching how to do grammar in English or whatever it is, or teach biophys. I don't know words, but it's more important in metaphysical field to make sure your emotional complexities, all your traumas, whatever it is that you haven't processed, isn't getting in the way of helping other people. Because that was another conversation after the podcast. But I know you had a teacher once that was
right. So finishing school,
maybe we'll eventually get there too. Actually,
we can get into there now.
Okay.
Finishing school, I hopped to work, and I wanted to help sick people. I wanted to take some time before what I'm doing right now, which is applying to graduate medical programs. And I went to go work in the world of pharmaceuticals and making drugs for sick people.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a beautiful adventure, biotechnology. I see an incredible field of potential in it in the future, where it can really be bridged with spirituality and vibrational medicine, biofield therapies.
Must be a
That's
spirit.
weird.
Did you hook up too?
I just did. I don't know what that was.
Spirits are tickling us.
Yes. Maybe that was a buzzword I just said. But there's a lot of incredible work in it, and I ended up going to work for someone who was way more tapped into this space than I was in the beginning.
When you say the space, you mean?
I mean the intersection
Okay,
of
gotcha. Perfect.
spirituality and intuition with like hardcore biotechnology, working with really sick patients, making drugs, biological models, nanoparticles even.
Yeah, because I mean, I even have a friend that and we'll get to this, but has this vision for this machine that will just clear your chakras, you put your hands in there, if your feet are on there, it'll clear, and it'll clear you. It won't fix you, but it'll make you feel a lot better.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that's definitely possible to merge both. And I don't really know how consciousness plays into it. But
like the very beginning aspect of it was when people who seek out learning things like Qigong or like Reiki, healing of the hands, touch, sensitive healing, relaxation, touch therapies. A lot of, let's say, Western-minded scientists, they really can ascribe a mechanism of action by which that actually makes someone feel better. Maybe we can chalk it up to the placebo effect.
Right.
But, a lot of scientists who are more on the DL and working on this stuff, at like the periphery of our current understandings, they're beginning to produce models and produce actual many biomedical devices that can be used to use, let's say, vibration or sound energy in order to be like a therapy.
Yeah.
Like a sort of a treatment on the human body. And that's not really medicine that is taking into account like your metabolism or, symptoms. It's more like it's like treating the person. It's not treating the actual pathogen, so to speak. It's very person oriented.
It's holistic.
It's like it's based off something called salutogenic models of medicine as opposed to pathogenic models of medicine. Like salutary is related to health, like good health practices.
Okay.
It's very preventive.
Okay.
Right. It's kind of interesting how there's a lot of potential for the future of medicine in preventative health from this kind of medicine.
Yeah. Once
before you get really sick and you're desperate to see a doctor and you need the hard drugs and all that stuff, that is equally as valid.
And I guess it all depends, but yeah.
Now, so part of finding good teachers, as we were mentioning, is I went to work for this company that had me doing like one thing by day, and my immediate boss later, let's say, came out to me about
her spirituality,
about her understanding of energy, consciousness, and how it relates to
so basically
physical work.
I was about to say how we were kind of talking about, well, this is the way consciousness works, and this is how everything is connected, and rituals or whatever.
Yes.
She's given you kind of a download of it.
She was, wanting to give me. I was very hesitant. I was there to be, a biologist, a scientist, and what I kept my own health or myself sort of inspired or healthy through my meditative practices or through my, going to sleep and having my experiences with these visual montages. Yep. That was a very self-care, just to me and those who understand it or have those experiences kind of way.
Yeah.
Right. But then I met someone who was more attuned to using those abilities to actually furthering your professional goals. And again, this wasn't like a priest or a counselor. It was someone producing medicines for very sick people, very noble. And the thought of being able to bridge those two was like astronomically mind-blowing to me.
It's exciting too.
And I was like, how? Like, you're talking about how you feel about things to navigate what scientific decision making, setting up experimental protocols. How is that possible? And it was very simple. I always say there's a lot of sophistication in simplicity.
Yeah.
And I learned that feeling my way through a lot of maybe big scientific decisions that had to be made, a lot of it boils down to intuition or feeling it out.
Yeah.
The space was it was a very in development company, startup phase. And so there were a lot of things that had to be done. So a lot of prioritizing, like what work to do first, how to do it. That was not really something that was like
Cat.
It wasn't obvious. And a lot of it just boiled down to feeling your way through it.
Yeah.
That kind of
It's not logical,
narrative,
bro.
that kind of narrative, it's very common to people who are starting companies out first, or scientists.
Isn't that so interesting though? Like
It is.
Alan Watts,
It is.
whoever it is. I mean, not Alan Watts. Steve Jobs. Like he always talked about intuition. The Apple company always using intuition.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess he's a little Buddhist, but like anyone that's, dude, he's just jacking up the. Anyone that's ever done anything and not known how to do it,
Yeah.
they're basically using some kind of faith in themselves,
All right.
which is intuition in
Right.
a way. But they won't call it that.
Not
I trust my gut.
Not at the
Oprah talks about it
not
too.
at the expense of, being
Because then you get ostracized.
lowered, by the others who are. It's very curious how people may get into a field through a lot of intuition and gut work,
Yeah.
and they can't really be open about it until they're maybe at the very top.
Mhm.
I've always found it very ironic how Nobel laureates in physics and medicine and chemistry, they all agree how much of the universe works on a very vibrational, quantum, emotional level.
Yeah.
And that was never mentioned as part of their publications or their work that led them to be great. Because if that kind of conversation had taken place before the right time, like you said, they
could be
met with ostracism. Yes.
It's because we're social creatures and we need acceptance. We need, I don't know. It's a lot. But okay, so you're working with her. She's teaching you intuition. It's interesting to you.
It's
how
very
simple it
interesting
is,
to me,
and yet
how practical it is. But this was also one of my first lessons in understanding the wisdom behind the practice. Just like some people are born with the ability to do very well in school, or to dribble a ball very well, or run fast.
which maybe that's based on past lives, but that's another conversation. too.
Right. The same can be said of people in the intuitive, psychic, woo-woo space. Some people are more naturally attuned to it.
Mhm.
I found out that this sort of ability or sensitivities, it typically runs in
I
families.
was about to say it's genetic, right?
There is an aspect
in
of
some
it that
capacity.
people in this space, they do call genetic. It is given across bloodlines. What we may call maybe like the epigenome, or aspects of the method of DNA replication that's still fully not really understood. I think a vast majority of the DNA in our bodies, they're not coding for genes. They code for regulations, regulating proteins or things that we can't really ascribe a definition to. We've been able to code out like all of our DNA, but we don't always know what it does. We still don't know.
I was about to say the junk DNA or how.
What we call quote junk DNA. Our bodies have been evolving for millions of years to streamline, to not waste. Nothing is junk.
Yeah.
It's just we just don't know.
So then we label it as junk, and then people discard it, even though, again,
probably
so many rabbit
not.
holes here.
Yeah,
but
many rabbit holes. But I was taken through all these rabbit holes through working at this company. It was a time of incredible learning. But and last time, going back to the topic of finding a good teacher, the teacher that I had, things felt forced. Things didn't feel as if things were approached with compassion, love, and understanding of self. It was more like I have this skill that I don't really have to be emotionally connected to, but I just use it because I'm so strong and good at it that I can identify the right things to make these decisions at my job, or I feel my way through things, but I'm not. The word I'm trying to get out here is there's a lot of lack of love for how it's being used, for understanding. This sort of introduced me into the divide of any skill, talent, or ability can be used for one way in one way or another, guided for, like maybe virtuous purposes and others that are more selfish.
Yeah.
It is possible to find people in this space who are inclined to, let's call it the darkness. They're maybe not the most enlightened in the sense that they understand why they're doing this or what it means or what it's
coming from an old pattern,
what it can actually create, right? Even in this space, there's a lot of learning, even among teachers. There are some teachers who do preach the dark. It's a very Harry Potter world.
Oh, yeah.
And there are other teachers who preach the light. And, that's where the term it's the cliche of love and light. It comes from a very deep philosophy that there is an option between what you can do with these abilities, just like any other ability that you can have.
You don't have to be a saint to use them.
Definitely not.
No.
And unfortunately, my first teacher was one who was not very naturally adept at these abilities. And I realized, I was like, wow, there's like a choice to be made with this. So that was a very big lesson.
Yeah, and I I feel like she's your first teacher for a reason. Like there's nothing on
looking backwards on it. I did find out that it was because I was so stubborn about getting myself to open up to this space. I had been just a little bit too hesitant. I had been a little too not attuned to the love that I wanted to, that I really craved, but there was a lot of fear of the unknown associated with this. And I needed, a kind, good teacher at that point in time was not going to be enough for me. So I had to end up having a teacher that was more brutish. Mm-hmm. And it cracked me open.
Yeah.
That's what made me just start realizing, like...
It still seems like you learned a lot. Like
I learned so much.
Like, a lot.
Things are never really black and white, right?
And
yes.
You can make any, what do they call it, magic spells. I just, ritual, whatever. It's just you setting an intention and believing it's going to work, in my opinion. Like, in my opinion, it's just my opinion too,
Right.
It's just, but it's all powered by conscious belief and how far you think your consciousness can stretch.
Yeah.
And what you can do with it, which comes from practice, comes from testing.
One very...
did you run tests? Like, what are these abilities? Like, we're talking about kind of around it, but like, what are some, I guess, examples
so what I mean
of like
is,
things you'd be testing?
So maybe if I'm in the realm of science and there is a list of hundreds of, let's say, diseases that I can choose to just test with this particular drug, I would very much just look at them on a list and run through them one by one. And I would just gauge my body on how it felt when I didn't really know most of these, and I would just pick one and deliver a list to the executives of the ones we should work on.
Interesting.
It was hundreds. There's no time or feasibility to research each one. So I would go through a list of, I think it was about 300, and I had to have a list of less than 15.
Wow.
And they worked.
Interesting.
They worked very well. They had a lot of demonstrated effects. Again, intuition, luck, just gauging how I felt. I got into doing Reiki at a big hospital in Boston because I worked in a space with people who do not really have resources or time left because of their conditions. Mm-hmm. So they were desperate for help. So it was kind of, I followed them down this rabbit hole of trying to explore their options. They're like, I found this, I've tried that. this thing called Reiki at the hospital. It really makes me feel better. I was like, I don't really know what this is. I've heard about it.
So
I
at
had
this
one
point, you don't
Reiki
know what
session
it is.
once,
Okay.
and I learned about it at the hospital. They have teachers. It's taking off in a lot of New England hospitals on a volunteering basis. But it's becoming, this complementary and alternative healthcare, like CAM.
Yeah, I like the way you said complementary too, though. It's not meant to
Right.
substitute. It's just meant,
They really do both. They're like adjuncts to each
Yeah.
other, right? So I took 2 courses on it, and
were those the Jamie courses or?
no,
Okay.
they were up in Boston, and at the same hospital. There's a very famous teacher, Libby Barnett. She's taught more Reiki masters than anyone else on the Eastern Seaboard.
Wow.
Yes,
Libby Barnett.
I was
Okay.
very lucky.
That's pretty cool.
Libby, if you're listening, thank you. Your teaching has come far for me, and I started doing it in hospitals, and people loved it. People responded well to it. They didn't understand it, but it made symptoms go away. It made people have less pain after chemo. It made people's stresses and anxieties go away. Those who couldn't sleep, those with mental health issues, they had improved symptoms.
So when and Reiki, I guess high level, it's removing energy, moving blocked energy.
It's like healing of the hands energy.
Yeah.
The philosophy is that a practitioner may put his or her hands on you, or they also don't have to, and they act as like a funnel to bring in like a sort of vibration and energy. We call it just like a deep form of relaxation is induced in the patient, and a lot of times they fall asleep. They get better. It's completely non-invasive. It's almost,
you don't have to touch them either. Like,
you don't.
Yeah.
It's almost comical how different it is from our Western medical practices, and it works. And again, the science of placebo effect has been put under more scrutiny because of these kinds of practices. At the end of the day, one line of argument is that even if there is no science behind it, pretend that there is not. The point
is that it works.
Is that it works. So if you have to give a little girl, a licorice wand that shoots off sparks, and that will help her come down from the effects of chemo faster, give it.
Yeah.
Right?
Because it works, and we don't need to scrutinize things. Is anybody getting hurt? No. I mean,
scientists and the FDA would probably beg to differ, but outcomes that are improved, they do warrant investigations, and investigations into the placebo effect, they do demonstrate that how we perceive things, how much we believe something will do something, it has an effect not just on the practitioner, but more importantly on the patient, and they get better. So belief is a core aspect of
biology
healing.
Belief.
Yes. It's like the mind-body connection.
And again, I hate that we can just put words on something and say, well, that's placebo. Okay, well, what's placebo? Well, that's when you believe something works, so it works. Okay, well, doesn't that mean something? If you believe something works and your body's changing based on a belief, doesn't that tell you something about the power of belief and consciousness, maybe?
Precisely. And that's when fields like psychoneuroimmunology have really taken foothold. This is, for example, a study in science. It's a branch, PNI, where the biological mechanisms underlying the connection between belief, what you feel in your head and your brain, how it translates into, hormonal changes, immune function changes, cardiovascular changes, mental health relief changes, that result as of nothing more than just experiencing happiness, experiencing a change in perspective, even laughing.
Yeah.
Very, very cool new science that I actually believe our ancestors from long ago were very well tapped into. That's all they had.
Yeah.
Well, or so we know.
Well, and I don't think they separated things. I don't think they were like, well, the way we feel and believe should be separated.
We've definitely gone through, again, this rabbit hole as like a culture where medicine and science has become very compartmentalized. It's a lot of functionalism.
It's dogma.
Yeah.
So it's hard to get around it. If this belief system's in place and everyone has to follow these belief rules, and And I get part of it because of what the church did in Europe and how they manipulated and controlled everyone with spirituality. And
Yeah.
there's some trauma there.
Mm.
So I get why we branched off. It
Mhm.
makes sense to me. But it is nice that I think we're at a point where we can start to come back to converging. So we were talking about belief and Reiki, and there was another thing I wanted to say was when you're providing Reiki services for somebody,
Mhm.
and again, this is, I don't know if this is my opinion, but what I've heard, and I think Jamie said this, is like all you're doing is activating their belief system that they can heal. You're letting them turn on that belief. Oh, I can heal. And then this other person serving as a conduit to transfer that energy to them. But in theory, they have access to that energy themselves without you as the conduit. In theory, right?
Right. I think it's like a two aspect kind of thing going on here. So one is you don't even have to speak to a patient while you're doing Reiki on them. So this, quote energy they are receiving from you, it is teaching, it's giving them a lesson. You are educating them, but at a cellular level, as in their biology is being reminded of what it is capable of doing. If the person gets curious about what's going on, they go to seek verbal information. They speak, they research, they learn, they see, they try. And then that sort of brings harmony between what the system knows or has been reminded of, and then what the mind, what the brain, what the left side, the logical brain accepts. And when there's like that synergy between like the emotional, physical, spiritual body, physical body, it just greatly magnifies somebody's ability to heal himself or herself. All of these lessons have brought me back very much to my childhood too. I had something that we cannot fix by today's medical standards, but it went away on its own. And it has very much led me to have one understanding of it, that it could have been the concept of being sick, not having a long life, it didn't just fit into my understanding of the world as a kid. That's the beauty in being a child. You haven't been indoctrinated into belief systems yet.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was like, whatever. I'm just going to do my thing. This is not inhibiting me at all.
I'm going to keep on living.
And it just slowly went away the older I got.
You outgrew it.
So it was by force. I had to develop this perspective that belief has a great contribution. And most people are not afforded that chance. It was a brutal experience for me.
Yeah.
It's not fun. And most people who have their quote, quote, awakenings into the space, it's not usually fun.
It's still not fun for me.
It's interesting. It's exciting. It's something new. But that stuff's also scary because you don't know any of it.
I think it is nice, though, to be like, this isn't the way things have to be.
Long term, yeah. In the grand scheme of things, it makes you open-minded. Yeah. It makes you believe that you can change.
You get a lot of power from.
Look at all the people around you. You see how many people feel like they're stuck, or that their lives have just become really not what they wanted as kids.
Oh, yeah.
Or they're unhappy. They're just stuck in their customs, their habits, how they carry themselves.
Stuck in their beliefs.
So exactly. It's all from your beliefs. If you change that, everything can change.
Which beliefs are habits, so that means you have to start creating new habits,
right?
And that takes practice and patience, which is not always fun.
I've come to see a lot of medicine is really not about healing people, it's about educating people. Yeah. It's about educating people about what our bodies can really do and what...
Yeah, they're made to heal themselves.
Exactly.
Like
imagine if that was taught in elementary schools.
And we're the conductors in a sense, and whatever we're thinking, whatever we're constantly thinking, because we're constantly thinking these days. So whatever thoughts we're giving momentum to, that's where the momentum's going to be. And then we have to slow down on that momentum if we want things to change, and that's where it gets hard. So Reiki in hospitals. Did you ever, one last thing actually I'm curious about, did you ever run anyone that was resistant to it and said, I don't think this is going to work, and then nothing happens because they are shut down in a sense?
Interesting thing about, maybe this is one of the ins and outs of Reiki. I did have one patient who had suffered a bit of a shoulder injury, and that the area of his body was experiencing a lot of trauma. My hands would get really hot whenever they sort of lightly floated over
Maybe
that part of his body.
releasing some stuff.
And I thought it was weird. And the worse my patients were, for example, if I had some that were suffering from advanced stage cancer, my hands were burning hot.
Do you think?
And they would get really like concerned, like what's going on, and I'd be like, you see what I see. I am just putting my hands over you and they're getting very hot. I'm not teaching you anything. I'm not telling you about my elite education or that I'm a scientist or that I am, and like I've told you nothing. Just look at it and you tell me what you see.
Interesting.
Right? And so this would obviously make them very curious and believers. Seeing is believing for most people.
Usually, yeah.
And so this man, I realized there was a bit of a shift. There was something that was resistant in his physical body from receiving Reiki. And my hands got hot to the point where it kind of hurt me a little bit. And he like grimaced and he winced and he flinched and he was like, ow. And he's like, please don't keep your hands there. And he looked up and he noticed that my hands weren't actually touching him.
Interesting.
Which brings me to say that the physical body has an innate knowledge that your brain usually lags behind. And that healing definitely also has to be on an individualized time scale. As in, if your body, almost independently from you, isn't ready to be fixed, or you're still getting something out of whatever is ailing you, it will feel uncomfortable. It won't feel like it's time to let this go. And it hurts. That. And a lot of people with cancer, actually, they may be ready to let it go, but Reiki on cancer patients tends to be very painful.
I feel like that could be really heavy on you too, though, because that's a lot of heavy energy. And like,
so,
I feel like you, and then this is another part of Reiki I guess we can talk about.
So this is the very first day that I did work in the hospital doing Reiki. I realized me doing Reiki versus a lot of not so naturally predisposed people doing Reiki, there's a difference. I was educated in Reiki, as in that the practitioner is completely deflected of anything that may be coming from above or coming from the patient. You're just a straw by which energy flows. Mm-hmm. For some people who may be clairsentients or empaths, people who are very sensitive, who really feel others' emotions, or their pains or their burdens. Try to process other people's emotions. Your energetic body, it begins to process it almost like on their behalf. Or you may get sick because your neighbor or your friend or a close relative is sick. Kind of like sympathy pains.
Because we are all connected.
It's sort of like that. Exactly. It's all a field, right?
Think of it like the body. Like one blood cell notices another one is damaged or whatever and tries to repair it. Maybe.
It's like they send out signals.
Yeah.
And our understanding of neurobiology hasn't really made it to the point where we acknowledge that we can take on what's going on with the people around us. Although it happens very frequently in the animal world.
Yeah.
And so when I went to do Reiki, I would get very deep insight about why they're sick, what's happening to them, what's, in some sad cases, the eventual outcome.
Yeah.
Things that other Reiki practitioners at the hospital were not experiencing. I would just feel it on a very deep level. And I very much held on to my beliefs and my intentions. Like, no, I don't have to carry this on. This isn't mine. I will let it go. This was possible for all non-serious cases when one day I came across someone who was very sick, like a terminal stage cancer patient. And I did my work and I felt okay when I was leaving the hospital. And then I got home and I dipped into a fever very quickly. And I just went to bed, and it was pretty terrifying.
Yeah,
it doesn't sound like something. I woke up in the middle of the night, maybe 1, 2, or 3 in the morning, and I was shaking. My body was shaking uncontrollably, and it felt like I was having a bit of a seizure. I was kind of going in and out of consciousness. I was so out of it. I couldn't really climb out of bed. I couldn't ask for help. I would wake up. I woke up because I was so hot. I was drenched in sweat. I had a crazy high fever. I think it was about 103. And then I lost like my wind, and I just kind of went out again, and I fell asleep / fainted. I'm not really sure.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Wow.
And I just felt like I was flying through not my body. It was a very intense, scary night, and I woke up. I actually sent Jamie Butler and her assistant an email. That's what I managed to do. I was like, something's really wrong. I need you to call me in the morning. I felt like I was in danger. I was like, I feel like something really abnormal is happening to me.
Yeah.
And I need help.
Well, a little abnormal.
It was really scary. And Jamie called me in the morning. And in emergency situations, sometimes I'm lucky enough to get a hold of Jamie so I can get a little bit of support. Mm-hmm. And she recommended a book to me called Dr. Joy's Way. Something along those lines. Yeah. And I learned that oftentimes when the physical body is engaging in energy work and it reaches a level that it is not yet attuned to working with, the body is extremely adaptable. We are creatures of evolution. For in the intuitive energy workspace, the same concept applies. Uh-huh. My body had been funneling a very pure, high degree of energy for someone who's extremely sick that it was not ever accustomed to. So it was, call it like a download or an upgrade. I called in sick to work. I said, I can't make it. I was very vague. I was like, I don't know, something's happened to me. I just don't feel well. I'll see you tomorrow. And I wake up about 10 or 11 in the morning, maybe even around noon, and the fever's completely broken. I feel good as new. I feel completely fine. And that's even scarier. Cause I was like, this is not normal. Yeah. How am I just fine? When I thought I was dying a couple hours ago. I was like, Jesus, I hope this isn't like the Ebola thing. Right?
Oh, where it comes
So I call Jamie. I was like, this isn't a regular illness I'm having. Shocker. Yet again. And she was like, this is actually fairly common in some people. Again, most people who take up Reiki, like a light education of it and then start in a hospital, they're not naturally programmed to interact that deeply with patients, much less extremely sick ones. Yeah. I was in a particularly unique position. So she said it's a lot about upgrades the body learns. And there's actually a physician, Dr. Joy, or is it Dr. Jane Joy? I'll get back to you on that one.
Either.
I think it's Dr. Joy's Way.
I can put it in the comments.
And it taught me about a physician who had a Western education in medicine and then got into the space similar to the way I did. And she does detail times when people who work with non-traditional medicine, they have bodily purges. It's I think they call it something like the healer's darkness. It's like a necessary purging that an aspiring physician in the non-Western arts may sometimes go through if their bodies are very particularly sensitive and they're getting ready to work with more intense cases, channel things that are even, the dimensions are infinite.
Yeah.
The higher you reach into to draw from, the more your body has to be equipped for it.
So it's I think the upgrading makes a lot of sense. Like, it's like, it has to adapt and it takes time to adapt. I don't know. The times are always going to be different.
We're like computers.
I like to say it, but then I have to say like emotional computers because we're very connected and the emotions are real. Our souls
Our brains are like the most advanced AI in the world. It's just, it also feels.
And we only use like 20% of it. And,
They say that, but I've come to believe we use
have you seen that movie?
Different parts of it.
You ever seen that movie, Lucy?
Yeah, that part isn't entirely true. We do use all of our brains, but...
That movie's about metaphysics, though.
But it's kind of funny. So from fMRI studies, right, all it does is measure blood activation in the different parts of your brain. And cells, when they use more blood, it means they're using more oxygen. So they're working. They're doing things, right? Mm-hmm. So that is kind of like our proxy. We're like, okay, if there's a lot of lights and colors in this part of the scan, that means your brain was activated.
Right.
This part of your brain was working. We use all of our brain. We just don't know what that all encompasses quite yet.
We probably don't know how to measure the consciousness aspect of it either.
For example, 90% of the cells in our brain are glial cells. They're not neurons. Our neurons are the cells that they shoot like the action potentials, like our thoughts. They're just like, the commands for the other parts of the body. They're just little like shots, little lightning bolts of electricity. Only 10% of our brain is those neurons. The other 90% are all cells that support their work. It could be like oligodendrocytes or astrocytes or microglial cells. There's just a bunch of cells that support the 10% that is all of what our literature covers. And yet, a lot of people who are not in Western science space, they actually are beginning to think that these may be cells that support our concepts of being connected to one another, how we feel things from other people, how, telepathy may work.
It does. But,
Right? So neurobiology, that's one direction that it's taking.
Or just even concepts like there's so many rabbit holes. There's so much stuff to talk about. Like if my arm was cut off.
Yeah.
My body could regrow it.
All of your cells do have the exact same DNA, the exact same memory.
Yeah.
So in theory, yes.
The practical application of how do I believe that my body can regrow it?
Yeah.
That part's tricky. And
Developmental and regenerative biology.
I don't know when we'll get there, but stuff like that, like I'm just like, I know that's possible. I don't know how I know.
As far as biology has gone so far, we've been able to reproduce growing organs and other, like there was an ear grown on a pig's back.
Yeah.
You just take the right stem cell. Again, every single one of our cells, they have the exact same DNA. Some are just turned off. Some genes are turned off. Others are turned on.
Yeah,
but every cell is, to some degree, capable of becoming another. We have various stem cells that live in our bodies forever.
In a way, we can change ourselves to however we want to be attuned or have whatever frequency we want to live in.
In theory, yes.
And getting conscious, not control, but like getting in the flow of where you're within consciousness and you don't have to manually control that. You just set the intention and then the intention happens. I don't know how that all works.
Definitely. At this point, it is purely science fiction. But in theory, from non-Western theory,
then this is why
you're possible.
Here. This is why you're doing what you're doing, to not to grow limbs, but like to combine both of these aspects. And I guess to come full circle, so you're doing the work Reiki, and you're merged into the metaphysical space. We didn't really get to the past life stuff, but I don't know if you want to.
Do we have time?
We got like 15 minutes. Can you talk about it in 15 minutes?
I may be able to do.
We could do another episode for that, though.
You want to? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I feel like we could talk for.
We could go for quite a while. But yes, so let's to your point of like why I am kind of here is because the merging of this world, even before actually having practical outcomes, solutions, being able to regrow a limb by altering, if you think you can, we need to be able to have conversations about it. The discussions and the talks between scientists and quote non-scientists.
Or just have a new field that's both. But I mean, I know
they are not even happening. Yeah. A lot of articles, for example, in scientific journals and publications that give what we've been talking about leverage and credence, they're pushed to the back. They're not allowed to be out for publication. Or journal producers, they just deem that, no, I don't think the world is ready for this, or I don't think this is really going to cater to the success of our journal.
But
legitimizing that it's okay to, broach this concept.
And like, we're not even using your name on this podcast for a reason.
Right.
And I don't know if you want to get into that, but I mean, that's part of the problem.
Well, yeah. If, again, as I mentioned in the beginning, those who try to broach this world before it's the right time, they may not get the most favorable outcomes. They may not achieve their goals. People may disagree. Again, people listen when you're huge in your field, when you're old and a genius, and you have like accolades and awards. Before that, you're just crazy mad scientist, right?
Like Tesla was.
Like many people like Tesla.
And we only know about Tesla. I mean, nobody knew about him for a long time.
Yeah. He actually is the one who taught me most of my things about believing in vibration and frequency to alter things. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, he did a lot more than just a Tesla coil.
Definitely.
Okay. So I guess where do you go from here?
Where do I go from here? I'm applying to med school.
Yeah.
I am going
How
to
is
be
that
a
gonna,
doctor.
I guess
Part of bridging.
it's going to be interesting, and we can talk about this for like the last part of the podcast. Is
Sure.
Like, how do you've done this metaphysical stuff. You know this stuff is real. You know this stuff works.
Yeah.
You want to bridge the gap.
Mm-hmm.
How do you not get super frustrated when you run and maybe that's just part of it. Maybe you just let that stuff go. I don't know. But
One of my guides, who I had a past life with, as a Native American in California.
When you say guides, do you mean a physical or a...
I mean a non-physical
Okay,
guide that I
cool.
lived with
Spirit
a long
guides.
time ago. It's a spirit guide that I connect with. She has been giving me lessons on using love as something to understand people and have compassion for people, even those who don't see the world the way I do.
Yeah.
I cannot blame anybody for not having had the experiences I've had. Some people even believe we pre-select our own experiences for a reason.
I kind of do.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I do get frustrated when people are not open to something. And I also realize that deep down they do long for it.
Mm-hmm.
Humans are, at an energetic and an emotional level, insanely naked creatures.
We are.
We're really bad at covering up how we feel. And dissatisfaction with the way a lot of systems in our world are going is rampant. People are not feeling harmony. So
No one is happy.
they're not.
One's happy with
they're
how
not.
things are
And
going.
I don't mean woo-woo space. I just mean war,
Just the world.
peace,
Just the world.
discrimination, bigotry, religion, freedoms to be who you are. It's kind of old now.
It's a lot of wounds
to not have that
are
stuff
just
anymore. Again,
out
speaking
there.
as like a millennial in 2019 in the United States.
Yeah.
But it seems that the world is not really at its optimum happiness. Right.
But that optimum happiness totally could exist,
It could.
which I'm an optimist.
And maybe it has a very long time ago. There's a lot of things we do not know about ancient civilizations.
Atlantis.
Atlantis.
Maybe.
But hey, they came to an end as well.
Mm-hmm.
So who knows what that actually means, in the grand scheme of things. There's a lot of frustration in this space, but I use it as an opportunity to help and don't really pin it all on myself, which is a thought I used to have when I was younger. I have a lot of help. There's a lot of people in this space who are doing very similar things, who are equally hesitant to speak out, because some people go missing. Some people lose their credentials.
So
It's happening less frequently. I mean, just in the news the other day, there were many officers related to the military who have given many video and photographic, evidentiary examples of UFOs.
yeah.
So
A lot.
there are conversations happening of things that would have just been apostasy not too long ago.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So the world is opening up. Things are, our conversations in the media are becoming more open-minded.
And the amount of just even people going into the self-help space or therapy or just realizing something's very wrong with the way we feel.
Right. People are realizing there's something missing with how we approach things. Something's just like it's funny. A lot of the dissatisfaction is led by how we feel.
Mm-hmm. Which is our internal compass.
Yes.
Compassion.
Right. Oh, there you go. I like that.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of change that's coming.
I think so for sure. And
People in this space can feel it.
it's taken me a long time to jive with I have to be an optimist because I know it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
I know the things that not the whole world, but just for me and the things I want to do with my life. I have to believe it's possible, because if I don't believe it's possible, then what's the point? I have to believe.
The first step to accomplishing anything, ironically, is envisioning it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You have to have that vision.
You have to have a
You
faith
have
that
to
it can
believe in
happen. Otherwise, why would you start it?
Yeah. And that means you have to feel with it, which means you have to feel.
Right.
Which means if you can't feel, then you have to unblock what's there that's keeping you from feeling, which takes a lot of work, maybe a lot of therapy, whatever it is. But once you can unblock it and uncork it and let those emotions out again and actually feel in your body again, then you start to feel inspired again. You start to feel momentum. You start to feel like it's worth it. And, you know, you on your journey, you're like, yeah, I'm applying to med school, but this is part of a way bigger picture.
Yeah. I'm excited too. Part of getting my applications profile in and everything has meant I haven't really been allowed to be as open about the things that are truly important to me in this space. Medicine is not just Western medicine, but applying to a school in Western medicine means that you have to preach the ideals of a Western doctor. Otherwise, they don't let you in. Otherwise, your bandwidth and your credibility go down the toilet.
Yeah.
So that is one frustration with the system. But again, I could have taken the option of being extremely frustrated and given up and pursued only being a naturopath.
Right.
Or anything in the alternative medicine space that is not taken seriously by the other space.
I think you got too much left brain for that. In a good way.
Yeah, it's important.
Yeah. No, left brain is important. Ego is important to some degree.
Having a bridge, bridging means that you have to have one foot in both worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be understanding and compassionate of both. When you judge one, that space isn't going to let you build anything on their property to connect them to another property, right?
Oh, yeah.
So building a bridge means you make peace with both sides.
Are you staying in contact with, all of your metaphysical allies, whatever you want to call them, like on this journey? Just
oh yes,
because I know
they're the ones who have principally guided me in how to shape my application. Things I should mention, things I should write, things I should not write.
Yeah.
They tend to be at odds a lot of times with each other. Even Spirit.
Yeah.
Says one thing, and then
I can
an
imagine.
MD, PhD advisor from one of the best schools in the world is just like, no.
Well, that's the beauty of it. They're giving you all this advice, and then your intuition gets to guide.
I get to
how it
exactly.
unfolds.
So you know how my intuition may have guided some work I did at that company in drug development.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing comes when I'm just flooded with opinions from both sides. There's a middle ground that happens between the two. It's very tricky to find that thread sometimes. But curiously, my experiences have made me go very deep into both sides. So I kind of understand the intricacies of both much better now than I did before.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is just going to keep growing as I get through medical school. And they're like, so you want to do a residency? Like, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? And I'll be like, well, I'd maybe would like to work with infectious disease, maybe immunology, maybe more cancer, maybe things with the brain.
Mm-hmm.
But I can do anything, just like any other doctor. But
Right.
it's the tools that I have and the perspective I have is just it's connecting it to other things.
Oh yeah, I think you'll open a lot of eyes, man.
That's the goal.
I'm super excited for you. Maybe a lot of third eyes. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me.
I think we'll probably have you on at least one more time to talk about
I would
the
like
thing.
that very much.
But Al has a lot of knowledge, and like this is a conversation, like I said, we don't usually get to have on here and go deep dive into this stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for coming on, and
Thanks for having me,
wish you
man.
the best of luck.
Appreciate it.
All right. Toodle. Oh wait. Well, I guess you don't need to do any plugs because you're anonymous.
I'm anonymous.
But maybe one day, we'll
Maybe one day I will
reveal all
refer
this.
people back to this and say,
This is where it started, right?
In the beginning.
All right. Free minds out. Toodles.